Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. Today is March the 24th. It is a Tuesday today. Overall markets, as you can see, kind of right back down in towards key levels. In this case, it's QQQ 586. SPY back down in towards key levels here as well. So nice pop coming into yesterday, ended up fading back towards the downside. We'll kind of talk about what to expect coming into today here in a second. Before we head on to the charts, what's up, everyone? Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. Good morning, Victor. Good morning, Marcus, B Roots, P1. Good morning, TW, Maria, Cosmic, Martin, Cinna, Lamit, Kendra. Yeah, what's up, everyone? Deuce, John. What's up, Robert, Andy? Yeah, what's up, everyone? Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. Let me pull up the economic calendar and then we will head on to the charts. Okay, first things first. As you can see, we had some news overnight. Actually, the main news was yesterday regarding the war news. We had a bunch of kind of headlines drop yesterday. We had some midday yesterday around 11 o'clock as well, just talking about more of the war with the US and, of course, Iran. So basically, yesterday, the main reason we had that initial pop towards the upside was right with the Trump war news, and then we had some more news, war news, sorry, later into the day that kind of dropped us back towards the downside. And now we're currently right at our previous day lows here. So let's go back onto the economic calendar, at least for some red folder news today. As I mentioned, this really isn't going to impact the market, of course, as much as the ongoing economic events that we have. So this is something to keep in mind, but don't put too much emphasis on the flash services PMI. This is something important though, so just keep that in mind for today. This is going to be at 9:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, about 15 minutes after market open. So this is what we have. And then the next red folder news event that we have is later into the week, which is on Thursday, unemployment claims at 8:30 as well. So with that being said, let's go on to the charts. There's a bunch of things to look out for today. After yesterday, we're expecting a little bit more consolidation after this big pop towards the highs, but now we have a couple gaps that we can be looking for. So let's first start off on the ES, and then we'll make our way down to the rest of the major indices and all the tech names here as well. So first things first. As you can see here for the ES, we're currently on the hourly chart. Overall markets bouncing nicely off the lows, but as you can see yesterday, just kind of came up in towards our key levels in this case, which was our Thursday's highs, and a little bit of reaction. A little bit of reaction off our Thursday's highs, came back down in towards that Thursday's lows. Really, this was the exact level I kind of talked about yesterday. I was expecting the markets to kind of consolidate a little bit more in between these levels. There's a couple nice trading opportunities, but really not too much yesterday just because we're inside of this big range that we had, which was that news candle earlier in the morning. So now with the ES, right, kind of just consolidating, a little bit of a move in the overnight session, a couple pops here, and now we're kind of just consolidating during the pre-market. What we like to see coming into market open is the reaction that we have off our 6620. So this is going to be the level coming to market open. As I mentioned, we had this pretty big gap that we have towards the downside, right? We end up gapping up, and now we created this gap. As you can see, we can kind of drag this gap over, and the overall markets, right, at least coming into today, we're going to have this gap fill towards the downside. So what we like to see here for the ES, if we want to see a potential gap fill towards the downside, is going to be the break underneath our 6620. In this case, it is our previous day lows. Hold underneath this level, and we can see a potential move down in towards our pre-market lows. Along with that gap fill that we created, we have a couple gaps here on the markets. We have this gap fill back towards the downside. We have this pretty big gap that could be filled here as well. So there's a couple things to look for coming into market open. So underneath our previous day lows, we can see a push down in towards our pre-market lows here and below. If the markets do want to push back higher, so far, right, we're kind of building this mini higher low, right? We had this big news candle. if we want to see any sort of upside here, we're going to have to defend this previous day low level. So buyers are stepping in, as you can see, breaking underneath it. We like to see the reclaim back above for this push back up and towards now. It's going to be our overnight highs along with our 6680. So this is what we have for the ES coming into market open. Let's just go into the SPY chart just because you can see this a little bit more clear. As you can see right here, as I mentioned, big pop with that news candle. We're just having a little bit more consolidation in between our key levels. In this case, what we have here is our 662 along with our 653, which is a pretty big level here. And now we're just going to mark out that previous day lows. So as you can see right here, just drag this over, previous day lows, multiple touches in this general area. If we do want to see some downside coming to market open, right underneath our previous day lows, we can see a push down in towards now. It's going to be our low that we created here all the way from the weekend, right? We have a big gap fill towards the downside, as I mentioned. If the markets do want to gravitate down in towards that full gap, 650. Underneath our previous day lows, we can be looking for that trading opportunity towards the downside. So keep this in mind coming into market open, right? We can either have like an immediate retest towards the downside right off the bat, or if it pops, or it breaks back underneath later into the session, we could be looking for the trade down in towards that 650. So this is what we have here on the SPY chart. If we go on to the regular trading hours, let's kind of just zoom this in. If you go into the regular trading hours, as you can see here, we have a couple gaps. So you can see this huge gap that we created over the weekend, right? Pretty big gap that we can fill towards the downside. So we have a couple gap fills that we kind of fill towards the upside. In this case now, right, we have this gap up. So we could look to fill the gap towards the downside, as I mentioned, underneath that previous day lows. We can see room down in towards now. It's going to be this 650 and that full gap fill. So this is something to keep in mind, as I mentioned, right? This big gap here on the SPY and the QQQ chart. All right, now let's go on to the NQ. NQ, very similar thesis coming into market open. Key levels that we have marked out today. And what we have drawn out is our 24,600 along with our 24,400. In this case, this was our Thursday's highs of last week. Nice kind of push up in towards this level. Yesterday, a little bit of rejection, and then a push all the way back down in towards our 24,400. So you can see yesterday, nice push up in towards that level. Some sellers stepped in, and a push right back down in towards a key pre-market level, and a little bit more consolidation to end off the day. So coming into market open here, very similar thesis to the ES. What we'll be looking for here is the reaction that we have off our 24,400. This is our previous day lows. You can see we actually broke underneath it here in the overnight session. And now we reclaim back above this level. So coming into market open, if we do want to see some downside here on the NQ, right, either the immediate retest underneath for continuation towards our pre-market lows here and below, or let's say, for example, buyers step in right off the bat, and eventually we break back underneath that previous day lows, then we could be looking for continuation back towards the downside here as well. So the key level today is going to be the previous day lows on both the ES and the NQ. If we're looking for any sort of buyers to step in or a potential bounce play, we could be looking for the bounce play here off our 24,300 for this continued pushback towards the upside. Another possible scenario, if the first 5 to 15 minutes is fairly bullish, you can be looking for the trade back up and towards our overnight highs along with our previous day highs here as well. If we go into the QQQ, as I mentioned, this one is a little bit more cleaner, right? Since we don't have too much crazy overnight moves, we just kind of have, right, a little bit more consolidation here in the pre-market session. But currently what we have marked out is going to be that previous day lows, multiple touches from last week here as well, and also in the pre-market. If we do want to see some downside, as I mentioned, underneath that previous day lows, we can see this push down in towards that full gap fill, which is our 580. Another possibility is underneath that previous day lows right off the bat, right, push down in towards that 582 along with that full gap fill here as well, which would be that 580. So this is what we have for the Qs coming into market open for some downside. If we do want to see any sort of buyers step in, which would have to be off our 587, right? We can see buyers step in and a little bit of a mean reversion back up in towards our 590. So this is what we have for the QQQ today. We do have this gap fill, as I mentioned, similar thing to the SPY. What I would like to see in the markets is all about the reaction that we have off our previous day lows. So with the war news that we've had, as I mentioned, the more uncertainty and the longer that the war does go on, we are going to have more volatility. And in this case, we can see this full mean reversion back towards the downside because Trump, right, said the war was off, and then of course Iran saying something completely different. So in this case, the longer the war goes on, the more uncertainty and the more reason for the market to actually just continue right back towards where the original news event was from, which is all the way back down and towards that full gap fill. So as I mentioned, this is only going to occur underneath that previous day lows. So if we show any sort of weakness underneath that previous day lows, 586, then we could be looking for the trade down in towards that 582 and that full gap fill, which would be that 580 here on the higher time frames. Now let's go on to the semiconductor ETF. We'll head on to some other names here in a second. But if you guys do have any charts or any tickers, you guys can now drop them in the chat. If you guys are enjoying this so far, I appreciate if you guys drop a like. If you guys haven't joined the free daily watch list, that of course is in the description below here as well. Okay, let's go on to the SMH. As you can see here for the SMH, overall markets just kind of consolidating this general area. Really not too much to talk about in this case. Kind of just ranging from our 402 along with our 388. In between here, not much is going on. A couple of these semis bouncing with the overall markets here, of course, but really just dead smack right in between the middle of the range. So just be a little bit more cautious. As for the SMH, still holding up nicely, but we're just kind of consolidating now. So until we can break outside this little range that we have created, right? Personally, what I like to see is now the break above our 400, hold above that level for any sort of continuation back towards upside. As for the IWM, similar kind of thing here, a little bit of an upper wick right at our key levels. Yesterday, we kind of came up in towards our 251 and a little bit of rejection off that level. So this is our last week's highs. Price pushed up in towards our last week's highs. Some sellers stepped in and it pushed right back down in towards, I'd say, the middle of the range, 246. So with it being right in between the middle of the range today, the key levels that you are going to have marked out in this case is going to be our previous day lows. And we can drag this over. So previous day lows is key here. Also lines up with our Friday's highs. If you do want to see some upside above our 247 for continuation higher, a break back underneath, we can see this push down in towards that full gap fill, which is all the way down in towards that 242. So this is what we have for the IWM coming into market open here today. Now let's go on to some tech names. As I mentioned, if you guys do have any charts or any tickers, you guys can drop them in the chat now. If you guys are enjoying this, appreciate if you guys drop a like. If you guys haven't joined the free daily watch list, that is in the description below here as well. Yes, Bitcoin, I will go over that in a bit with software that it's called Zoom It. If you're on Windows, it's called Zoom It. If you're on Mac, there's another tool. I think it's called Demo Pro. That one's paid, but for Windows, this one's free. Okay, let's go on to Tesla here. So as I mentioned, we are at a very key spot here on the higher time frames. Nice buyers that stepped in yesterday on Tesla. Kind of right off our 360 here on the higher time frame. So this is our previous level of resistance. And now you can see a first initial reaction. Some buyers are stepping in off this area. What we have to mention here now is we are coming back up into a key level of resistance actually. So we're bouncing off support, now coming back up into the area essentially we broke down from. So for Tesla, right, coming right back up into this 390. Let's keep an eye on this 390, or sorry, not 390. This was our I'll have to get the exact number for you guys, but it's our previous level of support. Now what we want to see here is our key level support if this is going to turn into resistance, which is, now let's actually just go back on it. In this case, it is our 380 to that 384 general area. If I was to mark out that whole area on the hourly time frame, this is the exact level, right? That 384 down into that 380. So for Tesla moving forward, at least the levels that I have marked out coming into market open, what I have marked out here is that 380. And then we have your previous day highs, 384. So coming into market open here for Tesla, this one was one of the names I was more bullish compared to the overall market yesterday. Some nice buyers stepped in right off the bat, nice continuation towards the upside. So for Tesla, you have a smaller gap filled towards the downside. And of course, the gap is a lot farther away compared to the SPY and Qs, which the gap is right underneath that previous day lows. So for Tesla, this one, as I mentioned, pretty strong buyers that stepped in right off a higher time frame key level. In this case was that 366. What I'd like to see coming to market open here today, if you do want to see some upside on Tesla, number one, you like to see really buyers step in here off that 380. Buyers step in here off the 380. You could be looking for a push up and towards that 384. Another possible scenario here now is the break above our 384 for continuation towards the upside. This one, of course, is less likely because you'd have to have a strong push and the overall markets would have to have a really big bounce here as well. So for Tesla, really the only scenario that you're going to keep an eye out for is going to be that 380 key level. And then we can also keep an eye out on this key pivot level here as well, which would be that 376. Price could come back down and towards this level. And you could be looking for some sort of higher low and some buyers to step in here off that 386. Tesla, we're going to have to see the price action coming into market open. It is in a higher time frame key point of interest, as I mentioned. This essentially previous retest level. So for some downside, right, technically the higher time frames is still in a downtrend. So the key level here is going to be this 385, at least on the higher time frames. If we also do break underneath that 380, we could see this flip and a push right back down in towards 375 and potentially our 370s here as well. So for Tesla, we could be looking for some downside, right? Obviously, yesterday was fairly bullish, but if it does flip back underneath, in this case, my key level here is our 380. It's also your Friday's highs as well. If we flip back underneath, we could be looking for this trade back down in towards, in this case, it would be our 376. We can mark out that previous day lows here as well, 374. Right, this can occur, especially if the market wants to show a lot more weakness. So we can keep an eye out for Tesla. Let's say buyers step in right off the bat and maybe later into the day breaks underneath, right? We could be looking for that trade back towards the downside here as well. So this is what we have for Tesla coming into market open here. We are in a very key spot. So as I mentioned, just keep an eye on the reaction that we have off key levels. It could go either way, just based off where the market is at currently. But this right here, right, you can just mark this out, 380.50. If it rejects, continues back towards the downside, is in play. If it reclaims back above, right, we can see this push back up in towards 390s, and even 400s if we reclaim back above that key level. So really, at least for today, right, just mark out those key levels that I talked about. In this case, it is our 385 along with our 378 here. So we'll just wait for the reaction that we have off key levels coming into market open. All right, now let's go on to NVIDIA. NVIDIA, another similar setup here as before. Nothing's really changed on NVIDIA. As you can see, we have multiple touches off the bottom of the range. And then if you're looking at the top of the range, multiple touches here as well. So for NVIDIA, some nice buyers kind of stepped in here off our 172. What I would like to see coming into market open here today is the reaction that we have off a couple key levels. Let me just now kind of refine some of the levels that I have marked out. Number one, we can mark out that previous day highs, drag this one over. And now we can also mark out that previous day lows, and we can drag this over here as well. So these are the levels that I have for NVIDIA coming to market open, just your previous day highs along with our previous day lows. If we do want to see some upside, right, of course, we like to see that bounce play here off our 175. Right, for that continued push back towards the upside. If we do break underneath that 175, we can see this mean reversion back towards the downside for that full gap fill as I mentioned. So a lot of these names are looking fairly similar to the QQQ, of course. And the SPY, if we break underneath that previous day lows, we can be targeting that full gap fill. Of course, if we defend our previous day lows, then we could be looking for the mean reversion trade back up and towards the middle of the range here. As for AMD, this one rejecting off key levels here on the hourly time frame. Yesterday, the key levels that we have marked out 206. Price came up, tried breaking above our 206 ultimately, right? Sellers staying heavy, and you can see kind of rejection. If you're looking at this on the daily chart here as well, not too much has changed, just kind of ranging in between our 206 along with our 188. So until we can break outside this range, right, just be a little bit more cautious here on AMD. If you zoom out even a little bit more, right, even a bigger consolidation. So bigger consolidation, smaller consolidation. So we have a smaller consolidation inside of a bigger consolidation. So until we can break outside at least a smaller consolidation first, you want to be a little bit more cautious. So that's what we have for AMD coming to market open. As for some upside, you would have to see the break back above or the reclaim back above this 206 for continuation higher, and also above our previous day highs here as well. If you want to see some downside, potential pop and fade off that 205, or now it's going to be underneath that 202 for that continuation towards the downside here as well. Apple, going to this one, nice little bounce yesterday, a lot more consolidation just in between our last week's highs and our last week's lows. Just mark out these two key levels. Really don't want to talk about Apple too much since it's just kind of at a key level of support. A little bit of buyers stepping in here off that 247. Now we're just kind of right back up into the area that we broke down from. Google, similar thing, a little bit of a bounce play here off these lows. Not really too much to talk about. This one is showing a lot more weakness compared to the markets. So for Google, keep this level in mind here. It's going to be that 298. If you do want to see some downside here underneath that 298 previous day lows, and also your Friday's lows here as well, we could see some more continuation down in towards our 294 if we do break underneath this 297. If you want to see some upside, of course, right, mean reversion, bounce play here for this kind of just trade back up and towards its previous day's range. As for everything else, right, Microsoft looking very similar, just right back down in towards key levels. A lot of these ones, of course, did not have a significant bounce with the Qs. So for something like Microsoft, Meta, right, Google, right, compared to, of course, Tesla or even the Qs, right, these ones look a lot less relatively strong compared to the markets. So that is something to keep in mind if the markets do want to reverse, right, you just want to be a lot more cautious just because, right, the tech really isn't leading the markets back higher. So that's really a good sign that it is going to be a lot more difficult to trade back towards the upside. As for as for Amazon, this one, if you do want to see some upside here, it's going to have to see the break above number one or 212, and then another level here, which was that 215. So for Amazon, just kind of ranging more here on the hourly time frame. So just be a little bit more cautious. Key level here is going to be that 210. You can just drag this over. So not really too much to talk about here on Amazon. And then, of course, for Netflix, this one's actually setting up fairly nicely. So this is something that we can keep in mind. Netflix, we are forming this downtrend break after some nice buyers stepping in here off our 92 key psych. What I would like to see here on Netflix, I kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday, is this downtrend break. So we have here multiple touches, another touch here, right? Another touch here off our 93. If we do want to see some upside here, it needs to break back above this trend line, and we can see this potential continuation higher. So what we have here is that break of the trend line. Also, if we can kind of form this right shoulder, we can see this nice continuation higher here as well. So this is what we have for Netflix. Needs to see now the break back above our 93.50, hold above our previous day highs here as well for that continuation back towards upside. Okay. With that being said, that was majority of the tech names. We'll go on to some other names now here as well. If you guys do have any charts or any tickers, you guys can now drop them in the chat. If you guys are enjoying this so far, I appreciate if you guys drop a like. If you guys haven't joined the free daily watch list, that of course is in the description below here as well. First name, Palantir. Let's go into this one. We kind of talked about this yesterday, shaping up nicely here on the daily time frame. What we had marked out was this downtrend break. As you can see, overall markets just kind of consolidating after this first initial push higher, right? Nice consolidation. We were looking for Palantir above our previous day highs yesterday. So Palantir, nice break above our previous day highs. Retest later into the session right off that 156 nicely. And now you can see a nice continuation back towards the upside. As you can see now, right at our 161, another higher time frame level of resistance. So if you do want to see Palantir continuation here now, above our previous day highs hold for this continuation towards the upside. So if you go back onto the lower time frames, a couple things that you can be looking for today here on Palantir: break above previous day highs hold, continuation towards the upside. This is one of the scenarios that we have marked out. Another scenario, just kind of consolidation at open, right? Maybe break underneath or pre-market low retest, reclaim back above our previous day highs, continuation back towards the upside here as well. So these are the few scenarios that we have for longs. Just keep an eye out on our previous day highs. That's going to be the main level. You could even refine this right up in towards our high that we created from March the 6th, and we can just kind of drag this over down in towards that previous day highs. So this can be their exact level, right? Break above, continuation. If we consolidate, right, reclaim later into the day, you could be looking for the break back above as well, that 161 for continuation higher. Really, that's the long scenario on Palantir. Could you be looking for this, right, rejection, off our 161? Yes, you can, but based off the daily chart, in my opinion, this is a lot more bullish, right? After this consolidation, you have this downtrend break. Usually we will see a break above our previous day highs. How will this candle close, right? It could close weak, but you would like to see at least that first initial trade. It is going to be higher right off the bat. And then we could see a potential rejection, but it is going to move higher first. So for today, Palantir, right, keep an eye out on longs above our 161. We'll see if we have continuation, but we should see that break above our previous day highs, and we could potentially see a move up in towards our 163. So that's going to be the key level that we have marked out coming into today. As for some other tickers here, MU, a little bit of a pullback, but I mentioned this is very similar to that Palantir setup that we had not too long ago, which was that earnings all-time highs. Right, very similar. As I mentioned, earnings, a little bit of a pullback, and now we're finally getting that here on MU. Right, break above our all-time highs. We had some earnings, and now we're going to have that mini reversal right back down in towards the middle of the range. So now for MU, some sellers stepping in back in towards the middle of the range. Of course, now I'd say if you are looking to buy the dip on MU, right, the trend is still intact here on the daily time frame, but we recently hit our all-time highs. So it's going to be a lot more difficult if you want to see a straight V-shaped recovery. Most likely, we're just going to have a little bit more consolidation, slowly push back up and towards our previous all-time highs here. So for MU, at least today, key levels, you can mark out that previous day lows, 400. Other levels that we have marked out here as well is that 435, that earnings low. SNDK, very similar to what MU is going to do. So if MU drops, SNDK is going to drop here as well. So for the key levels, you can see pretty big kind of pre-market action yesterday. The levels are kind of all over the place here on this ticker. But if we do look at the daily chart right now, as you can see, we are currently in a very key spot on the higher time frame. So for SNDK, what is most likely going to happen is kind of the breakback underneath along with MU. You could see some buyers step in here off our previous all-time highs and a push back up and towards our 775. But most likely with MU showing a little bit more weakness here, right, we are probably just going to get that right slow push back down in towards that 650. As for everything else, right, Intel, a little bit more consolidation, WDC, kind of very similar setup here as well. So for the rest of the names, right, HIMS, a little bit of a pullback down in towards that 21 key psych. Circle still holding up. So Circle is one of those names that are still holding up here. Bitcoin had a little bit of a bounce, not too much. But for Circle, right, key levels that you can just have marked out is going to be that previous all-time highs. Sorry, not previous all-time highs. Previous high that we created from a few weeks ago. What you would like to see now is, right, kind of this downtrend come back into a key level of support right off that 120 and right kind of continue back up and towards our 130 here and above. But yeah, as for today, let's kind of go over the game plan once more, and then I am going to get ready for market open. But as I mentioned, just keep an eye out on our previous day lows coming into today, 654 here. If we can break underneath, as I mentioned, continue push down in towards that full gap fill here is in play. So that's probably going to be my main scenario that I'm going to keep an eye out for. It does seem like we're trying to break here in the pre-market as well. So if we can maintain underneath that previous day lows, let's look for that full gap fill here on the Qs towards the downside, right? It's 582. If, for example, buyers step in within the first 5 to 15 minutes and we start rallying back towards the highs, then I'm going to be a little bit more hands off coming into market open, right? We do also have to keep in mind we have some red folder news within the first 15 minutes of market open. So most likely you are going to regardless wait for that first 5 to 15 minutes to form. If we break underneath, then we could be looking for the retest lower. If we break back above, we could be a little bit more hands off. As for all the other names that I'm keeping an eye out for, really primarily it's going to be the SPY and Qs themselves, right? Tesla, let's keep an eye out on our 380. That's going to be key here coming to market open. Other levels that we can have marked out now as well is going to be that previous day lows. You can just mark out this 377 here as well. And then every other ticker, right? NVIDIA, keep an eye out on NVIDIA underneath that 175. AMD underneath our previous day lows here is in play, but really primary tickers are going to be Tesla, NVIDIA, and then I'm going to keep an eye out on the SPY and Qs underneath our previous day lows coming into today. But yeah, that is going to be it for me today. I am going to get ready for market open here. If you guys did enjoy that, appreciate if you guys drop a like. If you guys do want to join that free daily watch list, of course, that is in the description below. Now, with that being said, I will see you guys all tomorrow. All right, take care, everyone. Peace.